Hey there, Yuris here, and welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how a community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. And my guest is Anamaria Dorgo, learning and community consultant, founder and community catalyst at L&D Shakers, global community of practice for over 7,000 learning and development professionals who helps strategize, design, and facilitate participatory experience for individuals, teams, and companies with her Handle with Brain business. So welcome, Anamaria.
I love it. Thank you, Yurii. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
After following Said, I have this word Anna and I like every time that something great is going on, I'm like, oh, it's Anna Marine. That's exactly what it is. So let's start with the beginning. So, what's your
Yeah.
definition of a community goal?
Yes. So I make a distinction in between community purpose or mission and then community goals. And I see kind of community goals as this layer that goes much more into the practicality. So I look at them as the measurable desired outcomes, I guess I could call them, that we want to achieve so that we can deliver on that mission or purpose. So usually a community has a purpose or a mission, and then it has several different goals that we have to chase in order to bring that purpose to life and deliver on that promise.
Okay, so what's a community purpose or mission?
So, for example, if I were to pick on the L&D Shakers, which is the community I just mentioned, the community of practice that I started and I'm still very much part of, we have this mission to create a safe space that enables and guides learning and development professionals to connect, grow, and take bold actions every day. Mm-hmm. So it's all about connection, it's all about learning, and it's about taking actions every day. And if I were to distill it down to goals or even the way we have structured our community, everything that happens in L&D Shakers falls into one of these pillars. It doesn't matter if it's a synchronous activity or async activity or project, it will always serve either the purpose of connecting us across the globe, the purpose of us learning from one another in the moment of need, sharing best practices, having access to coaches, mentors, etc., or taking bold actions every day. This speaks to all of our use cases, but also the fact that our flavor as a community, and that's why we call it L&D Shakers, we really want to experiment. So it's a space where we can roll up our sleeves and actually do the things and do something different than we would normally do at work, where everything's serious, we have managers, there's things that we have to kind of rules to play by. And so L&D Shakers is this space where we shake things up. So that is an example of a mission that a community might have.
Sounds like finding a fun in what you are doing. So, when people are working, sometimes they think that work is something they must do, like for money, and they don't really always love it. But I feel like the goal of the community and mission, that's what you are doing with L&D Shakers, exactly like bringing this fun into actions.
That's it.
So, what is one goal of the communities that you are working with at the moment or worked before that inspires you the most?
Many, actually, there's lots of them, but I'm gonna pick a community that I have personally launched, created, conceptualized, and led for a little over a year in one of my previous roles, because we can then unpack that and go as deep as we want to. So I was in my role of retail learning and development manager for Ace and Tate. It's a Dutch eyewear brand. And we had a train the trainer program. We had 70 stores across 10 European countries, and we trained a trainer in each one of these stores. And so we had about 70 people in total, and we designed a community around that train the trainer program in order to offer this continuous support, upskilling them, and fostering exchange and connections amongst them. after this official train the trainer program, which was a typical upskilling training program for them. And one of the goals we had to deliver in this kind of big purpose of supporting them and upskilling them was to enable the trainers to design and deliver their own mini interactive activities each month in their stores during their team meetings in an effort to continuously train their colleagues in the store. So that was a very concrete goal that we had besides other goals that was delivering in this purpose of why we've created this community in the first place.
So am I hearing it correctly that you were adding extra value to the training course that people gone through?
So usually a train the trainer is a finite program. It has a beginning, it has a start. You're bringing in people that are not coming from a learning background or a training or coaching background. You're training them with the minimum basic skills for this new role when they are expected to train, give feedback, and support their colleagues in their learning. So now you have these people and they go to that train the trainer, but then after in our case, it was a full day long training supported by videos and a learning path online. But after they were going through this, let's call it official learning journey, people would have to go back to their stores where they were alone, the only trainer in the store. And that task was for many something very new that they haven't done before. So the community was it was an effort to almost prolong the impact of that train the trainer, because there's one thing to know about what you have to do, and it's a totally different thing to go back in your store with your colleagues, with your manager, and actually have to do it. So we wanted the trainer to not feel left alone and isolated in this role. So we've built this online community for them to keep on sharing and upskilling, and we were running workshops and so on, just to make sure that they're stepping and growing into this new role that we were inviting them to step in.
I know from personal experience and having conversation with some folks that if you are building community based on like cohorts, for example, you have some course or training, you have a cohort, so the activity is falling down the longer time pass after the training, after the course. So I'm curious, what did you see in this community?
You mean that the activities are kind of like decreasing in
yeah, so basically you have a cohort, people are engaged, people are doing, people are working. Then like 1 week after the cohort, they are in the community, they are active, they're like exchanging experiences, they're learning. Then another week, like they're learning less, another week, and like in 1 month or 2 months, it's practically crickets inside.
Yes. We didn't have that because we had this very clear expectation. So we were not expecting them to engage for the sake of engaging it. Also, we were building a community in retail. These people were not in front of a laptop like you and me are every day. So they were on the shop floor with their clients, etc. So the level of engagement that we were expecting and the type of engagement was very mindful and purposeful and very much geared to the program and the intention. So what we were doing there, where we were using that forum in our internal, I don't know how to call it. Let's call it an intranet platform. They had all of their operations, their learning, their etc. And that's where in a bucket of it, we were able to create a community forum. And we were doing two main things. We were on one side communicating with all of them centrally from headquarters in terms of materials we were supporting them with, things that they need to watch out, etc. But also bringing them together and inviting them to share their work. And the platform and the community was always communicated as such. So they knew the moment they were onboarded how they should use that platform. So we weren't expecting them to be chatting there all day back and forth. We were expecting them to come to the community platform once a week, once every 2 weeks, when they had a concrete experience to share with pictures, materials, etc., that they were doing, and then browse through other people's experiences. And we designed it around something that was of value to them. So I would go and I would share a little activity that I experimented or a way I gave feedback to a colleague, and I would put it in the forum. But I would see 3 to 4 other posts that I would read and be like, oh, Yurii, that's actually really good. And so not only that, I would take that and I would implement it as such in my work. So it was all about this shortcuts. It was something that they were using in their role, in their work. So it was valuable to them. Otherwise, yeah, potentially if there would be no value or it wasn't linked to something that they had to do every day in their store that they were evaluated on, maybe that would have trickled down. So that was the forum piece. And we also had these workshops where we were bringing them together. And so I don't know if you ever worked in retail. I did. If you work in retail, because you're very much customer service, it's very hard for learning to truly happen. You're constantly on the shop floor selling, right? So it's very rare that you sit in the back of house in front of a laptop attending a workshop. So that was almost like a goodie for them that we were offering those workshops, sharing best practices, etc., where they would be learning, actually, like blocking time for their growth.
In many, there are these metrics, the daily activity or monthly activity. And from what I hear, that you managed to set really right expectations from the beginning. And sometimes it's not the case. So I'm curious, how did you know how to set the right expectations?
Yeah. So I think for us, it was that came like the very latest stage, this idea of how they should behave and to trickle it down to engagement metrics like once a month or whatever. So that was the last thing we did. We started from this the why are we doing this? Like, it's not just a community because I think it's cool or because my manager told me to do it or whatever. So it was rooted into something. And it was solving a clear problem that we anticipated when we roll out this program. And that problem was, we are training now relatively young people. Some of them were in their first role ever, straight out of university, first working experience. Their manager saw some potential in them and they were put forward as a trainer. So we were training them in that role, and then we would sending them back home, expecting them to have an impact. Now, the reason, and here I'm taking a step back actually with this goals and where does this project fit in the overall organizational goals or the overall strategy of the company? Because in retail, you have very clear KPIs and OKRs and numbers you look at. Like, performance is very clearly measured. So the first goal is sales and revenue. And so that's the main goal that these people have to do in the stores. And we have to support. And to achieve that, we were looking at different KPIs, right? So first of all is conversion rates. How many people from those who enter in the store are actually buying? Then we had things like average value per transaction or like items per transaction. How much are they buying? Like in terms of expensive items or more items. Upsales rates. If they're buying a pair of glasses, are they also buying a spray and a case and whatever, right? And then we also had this NPS, which was helping us track how satisfied our clients were with the service that they were receiving in the store. And so we actually started there. So that was the challenge. And everything we were doing at work and that I was doing was supposed to be plugged into one of these goals. So nothing was floating around. So on the second layer, we were like, okay, we are selling a product that is quite complex. We're selling eyewear. And so it's a technical product that requires this basic optical knowledge of how the eye works, what are the refractive error, knowledge of the product itself, the lenses, the frame, styling knowledge. Is your glasses fitting you? Yes or no? Customer service. How do you talk? How do you sell? How do you engage with the client? But also knowledge about manufacturing and supply chain. So there was a lot that we were expecting from these young people that were stepping into our stores to work with us, our colleagues. And if you add to that this kind of high rotation, like these people weren't staying there for long. Like they were working half a year, etc., and they would move on with their life. So there was this very important need for us to upskill them and to ensure that this knowledge is constantly in the stores and that it lands and it's being applied and our colleagues are being guided to do that. So that's where this trainer, the trainer came in, and the trainer community. And so we designed that with a specific purpose. And so it was very easy for us to then imagine, well, if these trainers exist and their goal is to train our teams constantly in the new products, give them feedback on the shop floor, and so on. And that's what they have to do. That's the skill, because those skills will impact higher sales, higher NPS, higher whatever. What are the behaviors that we want to see from them in terms of their own growth and learning? So now we kind of trickle that down and we said, well, what does it mean to be a successful trainer in that role in order for you to train your colleagues, in order for them to sell more? So in order for you to do that, you will have to once a month host a training in your team meeting day. That training you have to design. We're going to support you design that with materials, but then once you're designing it, you're going to take all the pictures and document the process, and you're going to put that activity and that training on the platform for others to see it and for you to see what others are doing in all the other 70 stores. And so at any given time, we'd create almost this wiki of resources, and they were all grabbing them, inspiring, like taking inspiration from one another. And maybe I'm trying something that you tried last month, but I'm giving it a twist. So I'm improving it, I'm making it bigger, smaller, etc. So that's kind of how we then trickled it down to, well, how should they behave in this community in order for them to do their job right, in order for their colleagues to sell more, in order for us to look at the numbers and be able to go back to our leaders and say, that's why we're doing all these things, because we see an increase in XYZ in the stores.
So I can clearly understand how community impacts its members. Still, I'm curious how this community helped to grow this training business, like how it impacted the organization itself where you worked with.
Yes. So this was always, when you build community, especially within an organization, when you design that purpose of why we're doing this at the very start, you actually, in most of the cases, unless it's grassroots, so if a trainer in a store would have started this and bringing their peers together, whatever, if that would have been the case, like grassroots communities within organizations, where a colleague just kind of starts to organically bring peers together, like their colleagues, that is always rooted in their member needs, right? Now, in our case, that's the second option to start a community within an organization for your teams, for your employees. It's to start it centrally. So in our case, it was built very strategically around that. So we actually were looking at the data before. So in retail, you're looking at data every single day, every week, every month, every quarter, and so on. Data is what matters, and you have clarity. So actually, before you start the project, you see numbers in red. That's why you come up with the idea of a train the trainer, of having a trainer, is because, I see that some stores are selling better than the others. Why is that? The product is the same. I see that some teams are more skilled at doing this and that. Some stores have very high NPS. Customers are really happy with them. Others are not. And so it clearly became very clear, very easy, that it is the level of knowledge and skills and expertise of our teams that are driving sales forward, conversion rate forward, NPS, for all of the things we cared about, actually, and we were looking at. So the teams in retail they are crucial. They become very important. So at the same time, although centrally we were supporting them with trainings, videos, chats, onboarding, everything was kind of in a platform. As I said, reading that does not mean that you apply it on the shop floor. So then we had a decision. We were like, are we loading our store manager with yet another task to train the team? Or can we actually take someone in the store with potential and give them this unofficial role of a trainer and have them do the sole purpose of training their team? And so what we saw is it was some very clear impacts in OKRs or KPIs. On one side, as we were looking at the numbers, we were seeing how the stores are doing. And so if we saw that the percentage of add-ons, like these are all of the kind of accessories that clients could buy with their purchase, is very low. And we were like, okay, if we increase that, we increase sale, right? So we were looking at that, and then we were going and working with our trainers and with our store managers in the type of activities, refreshers, tips, etc., that they have to do in their store with their teams to increase that. So we would activate something with the trainers, and then in 2 weeks' time, we would look back at the numbers. Is that higher? Yes, no. In this store, yes, good for you. In this store, no. What's happening? What's missing, etc. So it's and the time of reaction, it's sales. It's very fast. So we saw impact in that piece. And then on the other side, we were doing this employee NPS to kind of check the health and happiness of our own teams. And we were potentially, I think, 3-4 months into the project rollout, the trainers in the stores and the community, etc. For the first time, probably ever, learning, getting feedback, and feeling supported in my role has popped as a positive thing from our teams. So we saw that our trainers are doing their job because our teams in anonymity were telling us, I'm happy with training. I receive a lot of feedback. I feel supported. I feel that someone cares about me, and I feel ready to do my job and act as a sales assistant on the floor. So that was a good part. And then something else that was kind of unplanned or unexpected, that was a benefit for the organization in this case. It was this talent pipeline, let's call it, because a lot of our trainers were promoted in short time to assistant store managers or a store manager role in their store or in new openings. Why? It's because their role as a trainer has empowered them to be more confident, to also flex some of their leadership skills that they would usually not have the opportunity to do so in just a retail assistant role. And also has increased in a way the visibility of their profile with the regional managers and with the headquarters teams. So these people were more visible. And so when you had to promote someone, it's like, oh, it's Yurii, actually. He's doing a good job. He's training, the team respects him, and so on. So you don't have to go outside. So there were a lot of different benefits that the org has seen as a result of this project.
So yeah, I was exactly, when you were telling that you created how people to become trainers, I was exactly thinking, did they receive some kind of promotion? Because it still sounds like they're getting an extra work to their plates. But I feel like this extra work really benefits them in the near future, because they will become more confident and like in their leadership skills, and then finally they are getting promoted. So it's like value first and then promote. But I get it. So
in our case, just to iterate on that, like the types of, because that's a big conversation in community, how do you reward them and so on. So in our case, they didn't have anything extra to their salary. So it was a role indeed that they were doing on top of their job. But on top of their job means it doesn't, in retail, it's like you're either selling or you're doing something else. If you're not doing something else, then you're selling on the shop floor. So for them, it wasn't something that they had to do extra time to put in. It's just their work was diversified and made a touch more interesting through that. They were very, very visible. So obviously not all of them, but many of them were really talented. So they got promoted. We would spotlight them in our newsletters, in our intranet. It was always our trainers, etc. pictures. So it's this visibility. You're feeling seen. In 500 people, these 70 people were the most visible beside our store managers. We were running a lot of just campaigns, prizes for them around knowledge, refreshers for them trainers. So they would get swag that was only for the trainers. One of them was able to come and be a part of this Train the Trainer official program that we would do all the time. So it was me and them. So that is that they were building skills. So you could see them actually becoming something else, like moving from just a retail assistant into a different role. We had 3 of them promoted to deliver regional trainings for new openings. And so when we were opening a new store in Germany, it wasn't Anamaria going to train the whole team, a team of 7, a team of 10. It was actually Yurii, the trainer in Germany. But Yurii was a trainer in Munich, right? So suddenly for one day he got to travel, there was hotel, and he was the person that would train a new team from scratch. So there was a lot of these rewards related to gaining knowledge and status.
And I feel like it also looks really good on your CV, all those activities, so you can move forward if you'd like to.
Yeah.
But anyway, so while building a community, like while working with a learning and a community team, what other teams did you work with and how community impacted them?
Yeah. So I think when you build them internally, it really depends on, I guess, the type of community you're building. Because sometimes if it's about leadership development skills, etc., usually there's this learning and HR departments that would be involved. Sometimes if you're building the ERGs, employee resource group, that you would be involved, we could talk about the DIY department or the culture department, etc. Sometimes it's the center of excellence. Sometimes it's the innovation hub if you're building a community for innovation, and so on. So there will always be different people and their stakeholders involved. And I also think that even if you're building it internally, for us at least, it was always this piece of marketing or branding around that project. So we wanted the trainer to have a logo. We were preparing swag. Everything had a certain look and feel. So everything that we were doing around the trainers community was very much had a visual identity that everyone knew about that. So we were working in L&D, so obviously we needed our marketing colleagues' support to do that, as well as internal communications, because we were doing a lot of engagement campaigns, communication, newsletters, spotlighting them. So we were working a lot with them. Now, I think that when the impact is really, I think that it's much differently when we switch our lenses from internal community to a community of users or a community of clients, because in that case, where you're building a community that is external facing, then indeed depends on what you're building. You as a community builder, as a community lead, might work very closely with your product design team or your product manager team if your main purpose of the community is to extract feedback, product feedback, right? Or you might work very closely with your marketing or social media team if your user community is supposed to be top of funnel activation, marketing campaign, events, etc. Or maybe you work with sales and growth for specific projects like maybe discounts or affiliates for the community or things like that. And sometimes, I guess, depending on the type of company, I also imagine us as a community builders, if we build a user community or a client's community, you might at times work it with expansion teams, I guess, if they're using community to test new potential markets. So I think mainly the benefits, if I were to go to that, is almost always insights and feedback into your audience. Whereas in an internal community, the benefits should be always immediately linked to org, OKRs, and strategic goals that the organization has. So it's not that another department benefits necessarily, it's more that the organization benefits because you're plugging into the goals that you have as a company.
What are the biggest challenges that you faced in growing or sustaining an internal community, and how do you address them?
Yeah. So in this case, I wasn't with them long enough. I think I was a year and a half. So usually challenges appear after a while. And I think, I don't know, it was not a very complex community. It was pretty straightforward. And I think we did a great job at managing that. What I do see in my work with my clients is this, again, I think, going back to the two types of communities that you might see, grassroots or kind of top-down strategic. For the grassroots, I think two main challenges is the first one might be this lack of sponsorship, I think I could say, because they're lacking, they're starting and they fail at the given moment to connect and get the approval, the nod, or the legitimacy from one or two upper leaders to kind of get that green light to continue. And so if they don't have that, their impact stays quite under the radar, they're flying under the radar, they can't do much, they don't have money, they don't have visibility, and so on. Solution, I think it's always after you started, if this is grassroots and you're just an engineer starting a community of learning, whatever, is to always go ahead and think, who might be invested in the success of this community inside? Is it the head of engineering? Is it someone in learning because we're doing learning? Like, who is it? And see on the leadership scale, how high can you get to actually network and connect with those people and sell the idea you have. And I think the second piece, you've hinted to this, is this lack of time. The second piece that I see with grassroots communities that are started by employees or colleagues, it is they're rarely community builders, so they do not have the skill set, like they lack the skills. They have a passion for what they're doing and they're bringing people together, but they rarely know what communities are and how to build them in a way that is decentralized and sustainable over time. And so they're doing that on top of it. And so after the first 6 months or a year after that novelty and excitement wears off, they start to feel it as a burden on their shoulder. And they start to almost at times get sour because if I'm not doing this, no one else is doing it. And then, and so that, and I get that. And that's also linked with, in a way of this, it's very hard to gain visibility, right? And get that beyond that intrinsic motivation. Like, I think all of us need a tap on the back at times because community building is hard. So we want to feel seen and we want someone to appreciate and value the work we're doing and that effort. So I think are these two things. And if I were to think from the other perspective, like strategically, L&D or HR or someone launching the community, I think the biggest struggle they have is they fail to kind of move from this service mindset, I guess I could call it, and creating a service for you guys into this co-creation collaborative mindset that communities need. And so it becomes something that someone pushes down, and very easily they will struggle with engagement. No one cares, no one engages, because you're designing and delivering something, and actually a good community is co-designed and co-created through the cycles of collaboration, just to make sure that you stay true to what's important to these people.
It sounds like sometimes when there are some learning initiatives coming from top down, people like, I don't have time to finish my work. How can I get time to do this? How can I get time to learn or to be in this community? And I believe that it's all about like having conversations and really understanding, or maybe even some kind of a selling to people the idea of how this community, of how this learning can help them to be better in what they're doing and to hopefully save time or to make more money.
Correct.
Or like something they're interested in. But I feel like it's the hardest part. And usually when you have a task to deliver some kind of a learning, you have a task and you have to deal with your task, and other people have their tasks. And it's always hard to like find the bridge between those tasks. But I think that's exactly the trick that community builders and learning specialists must know how to deal with.
Yeah.
And Anamaria, I really wish to have the sky is the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question: what is one actionable step someone struggling to identify the ROI of their internal community can take right away?
Okay, so I would maybe share a set of questions that are useful to me to think about that. I think the first question when there's an existing community and we don't know how to measure its impact or what are we doing here, is always to go back to the question, why did you start this in the first place? Why does it exist? If they can answer that, perfect, you move to the next question. If they cannot answer that, then obviously you need to go back to this foundational piece, because if you don't know why you're doing it, there's no way for you to measure ROI. So that's the basic. You need to know why. The answer of ROI for me is in that you're doing this for a reason. If you know what the reason is and the change you want to bring in, then you need to ask yourself how you measure that. So the second question there is, if they do know how to answer, ask it, okay, cool. So you know why you're doing this. The second question is, how do you know you are making progress? what are you seeing to know I'm moving towards this, the reason, the purpose, the goal of the community. So this usually should lead to actual behaviors, like doing things. You see people doing something. There's some sort of something that you observe with the eye. It's not a hunch. It's not an assumption. It's something that anyone can look at and be like, yeah, that's the thing. That's how I know we're making progress. So if they can't answer that question, then they need to sit down with that goal and be like, all right, what will I see and what kind of OKRs and measurements do we have them? And lastly is this piece. Okay, if you know why you're doing this and you know what you're seeing in order to know that you're making progress, the last question I ask them is, where can you link this progress or change that the community is doing to a strategic goal or to an OKR company-wide or departmental-wide or whatever? Because that is the final piece of who do I report to? Where does it plug in? Where does it belong in all of the things that strategically we need to do on a yearly basis or quarterly basis? So why? What do you see? Behaviors. And those behaviors, where are they impacting? Which case? Sales, customer success, NPS, what, where? So that's a little framework that I use.
I believe it's a very important part, exactly what you mentioned. The last step is to connect, because I know that usually experts and community building, they know why they know how to track the progress, at least they think they know, but they don't know how to connect it with like broader organizational or business goals. And that's like where I see this in my mind. I see this picture from South Park when these gnomes, like, step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. So exactly that's, we are missing this bridge between like building a community and connecting it with business goals. But it's super crucial.
Sorry, just to make a point there, I think that bridge is harder to make if you do not have this from the get-go before even you start a community. Because in real life, especially when you build within an organization, you have to put in time, you have to take people away from their job. So you really need to make sure that you know why you're building something in order for, it's like members need to care, yes, right? And we need to design something of value, but also the org needs to see value in that. Because if they don't, someone is going to knock at your door eventually and say, why are you pulling my people out from their desktop for these learning sessions? Like, what is this thing? Why are we doing this? So in real life, you actually go the other way around. So at the beginning of some place in time, there's a strategic, I don't know, the company needs to, in X years, we need to achieve X strategic direction. In order to go there, we need X, Y, Z. We need to do X, Y, Z. To achieve Z, I think a community could be a good tool to go there. In order to build a community, we need to do A, B, C. How do we know we're making progress in ABC in the community? And so you go the other way around. You go from higher level to community. But sometimes we build a community, we think there's something there, and then after a year or two, it's like, okay, now how do we link this to a strategy? And I'm like, well, why did you do it? Like, why is this important in the org?
So, you make it so easy to understand and to see the bigger picture. That's exactly how I understand what kind of expert you are, because otherwise people like, it's so much harder. And last but not least, name 2 people I should reach out to and talk about community ROI.
Oh, I think you already talked to some people, but I don't know if you talked to Tatiana Figueira. Okay. So Tatiana Figueira comes to my mind because I don't have a lot of depth into her work, but she's focusing on a community as a business. And so when you're designing communities as a business, the piece of ROI suddenly becomes front runner. Like that's what this is all about. How do you make money with community? And so I have this intuition that Tatiana could have some really good things to bring forward. Second person, I don't know, man. I know you talked to Etche and she sent you my way. So I don't know who else.
You can do the Spider-Man picture, like pointing finger backwards. So it totally works.
If anyone else comes to mind, Yurii, I'll let you know.
Got it. And what is the best way to connect with you?
The easiest way, I think, is LinkedIn. I'm Anamaria Dorgo. You'll find me there. I share a lot of stuff and articles and whatnot around community, but also learning and facilitation. So I kind of play at that intersection of topics.
And very valuable stuff. So definitely please go and connect with Anamaria. And yeah, Anamaria, thank you so much for this super valuable conversation. Always happy to talk to you. And thank you so much for sharing your amazing experience so openly.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
And yeah, see you in the community world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.